नौनिहालाने जमात मुझे कुछ कहना है, पर है ये शर्त के ज़ाए मेरा पैगाम न हो.
So have you noticed over the past few years that more and more restaurants are offering halal options? What's the reason for this?
I think it's an inclusivity thing, right? It's a matter of acknowledging the fact that there are more and more Muslims within our society, and then catering to their needs, providing for them.
There's a funny story my mom told me about, 15 years ago. She was telling me that when she went to a place to eat and she asked them to change their knife, they looked at her very strange in one sense.
Like
Right?
foreign to them.
Yeah, that used to happen to me too when we used to go for, like in high school, go out for Subway, whatever. They used to make you change their gloves.
Yeah.
Well, I would ask them to change their gloves so that they don't, from pork to chicken, and they would look at you weird, but not so much anymore. Yeah, now it's like gotten to a point where you go to a restaurant where you wouldn't go to otherwise. They'll serve alcohol and they'll also say that it's halal, so you can eat halal there.
It's almost ironic.
But it's also, I think, there's an economic facet to it as well, right? Like you have to, yes, you're catering to the Muslim demographic, but now you're also getting their business, right? So
Yeah,
Just for business,
yeah.
just to
When-
make in the money.
Yeah.
exactly.
I think they also acknowledge the fact, obviously, that there's a lot more people who are Muslim,
Right.
identify as Muslim in the West these days as well.
Yeah,
Exactly.
so they're probably looking at it from like a cultural perspective. There's a Muslim culture, they probably eat halal, so you should, cater to the halal so they can get it. But
You said culture, so is that Muslim culture or is that Muslim religion?
Does it have to do with Islam or is it the culture?
well, yeah, the concept of we can talk about that today if you guys want, but the idea is the actual aspect of eating halal is religious. It's not cultural, but it becomes cultural because everybody here does it. But
Right.
we can talk about that. We can say, what is like Muslim culture and what type of cultural clash do we have today in the society, living in society today.
And I think that's very interesting that you mentioned this. A lot of people talk about this culture clash with religion. And I feel like people use these broad, generalizing sort of statements without actually understanding that, you have to get into specifics. For example, a cultural clash for someone who comes to Canada at the age of 25 versus the age of 5 is completely different.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
For a male and female, completely different.
Yeah.
Somebody, for example, the way religion is practiced or Islam is practiced in Canada is completely different than how it's practiced in a different place.
Right.
Then we see another example where sometimes we have a culture imposed on us, and in return, we try to impose our culture on them, in that sense too. And lastly, sometimes I even notice where people perceive it to be a cultural clash with religion, but in essence, it's a cultural issue. So to give you an example, like this happens where we say that, sometimes parents say they have a preference for marrying someone who's light-skinned. They want to, for you to find a partner who's light-skinned. That has nothing to do with religion. That's
Yeah.
a cultural issue altogether.
Yeah, like you could have a Korean person that's Muslim, you can have a Jamaican person that's Muslim, you could have a Korean person that's Hindu, but that doesn't fit the right demographic that you would always think that, okay, usually think, Indians are Hindu, or you think Pakistani are Muslim, or you think Arabs are Muslim, right? So it doesn't matter, it could be anybody, but the culture that they bring from that country is always different. There's cultures that are different. So there's a difference between culture and religion, and that distinction is sometimes, that needs to be made, but that is very easily, mixed together because we all are growing up in a certain type of environment, certain type of way, certain type of language, certain type of cultures that we grow up with, even when it comes to food, right? So that's
so it's
something that we should
probably
make.
not just us who are, or Muslim youth who question these kinds of things, right? When we say that Muslim youth may have questioned their Muslim identity, and even us, growing up, there are certain things that, you don't know the answer to. Why does the religion of Islam say something for a certain reason?
Right.
Why do we have to justify living our life in a certain way, right? But I mean, sometimes we may forget that we're not the only ones who question these kinds of things and challenges that we face.
Right. It's human nature. Everyone
Christian youth might be questioning Christianity, Jewish youth might be questioning Judaism,
Of course.
right?
I think the
So
reason,
maybe it's just a natural course that youth take.
yeah, and I think you're right, but I
questioning
think
their
the reason Islam is under the umbrella right now is because of the social and the societal setting right now that we're in. So Islam is under attack. So everything is about Muslims.
Especially in the media.
Yeah, especially in the media. So any sort of bombing that goes down, any sort of terrorist attack, everything is linked back to being a Muslim. So then you're gonna have an identity
A negative
crisis
connotation.
because even me myself, I'm sometimes not comfortable telling people that I'm a Muslim because they're gonna right away get scared of me or are they going to think, okay,
Like they label you and
yeah,
judge
they're going to label me
right?
and they're going to judge me because I have a labeling now. Like Islam has a different labeling now, which is as sad as it is. We need to
Yeah.
rectify that, but
Yeah.
that's where it comes from, right? So obviously the youth is going to get faced by that, right? You're not going to tell people you're Muslim because people are going to think you're a terrorist or you're thinking about something else. You never know what we're thinking. You're going to have a suicide bomber. You're going to have
Yeah.
this. You're going to have that.
So you fall victim to the stereotype, which then in turn leads you to this inferiority complex,
Yeah,
right?
the inferiority complex is it's huge. Like if I'm having it, and I'm an adult, and if we're talking about the youth, of course the youth is going to have it.
Of course.
Our parents have it, right? Like so, you're trying to hide your identity because you don't want to be, you don't want the microscope to be on you, but you should be proud of it.
So, okay, I mean, like the term inferiority complex, what does it actually mean? What's actually going on when we say that, somebody's suffering from an inferiority complex?
Where it's a feeling of inadequacy in one sense, where the person has, and a lot of that has to do with the fact that the way Islam, as Ghulam has mentioned, is being portrayed in the media today, we almost feel like, even saying I'm Muslim in public, we feel inadequate about it.
Right.
Yeah.
And that's the thing I always say to people is that, listen, number one, ask for accommodations, ask for your rights. Why? Because that builds your own character and confidence. And number two, if someone who behind you or next to you is kind of shy and does not, not say that, by listening to you, they'll also then build their confidence and they'll voice their opinions as well. So that's something that they have
Having
to
this mutual support.
It's also like self-esteem, right? Like if the media is projecting it all the time like this, then obviously your self-esteem is going to drop. Everybody else around you is going to drop your self-esteem. So you're not going to be voicing your opinions. You're not going to be voicing your beliefs as much. So it has to do with, I guess it has to start with educating yourself and educating the youth and educating those around you. But it's going to start with yourself. If you know what Islam is about, if you know what the true teachings of Islam are, if what it means to be a Muslim, then you're gonna have a good backbone, a spine to stand on, right? But right now you don't even have a spine, and now
Because I mean, if the objective is to be proud of your Muslim faith, and yet you don't know what the Muslim faith is, then how can you be proud of something that you don't even know about? Right?
And if you know what it is, if you
it's
know
all
the
about
true
education
teachings,
and
if you know the true teachings, then you will be automatically proud of it because Islam is beautiful, right? Which we're gonna try to touch upon here today.
Right.
So what is it? What does Islam consist of? What does it mean to be a Muslim?
Yeah, go ahead.
Well, I was just going to say, being a Muslim, at least to me, is very straightforward, right? It's following the hadith of the Holy Prophet Muhammad sallallahu alaihi wasallam, as well as the teachings in the Holy Quran, right?
Yeah, the Sunnah and the Hadith and the Holy Quran,
hadith, right? So that's really all you need, right, to be a Muslim. Now, what your culture says about you is completely different, like you mentioned, right? You could be a Jamaican Muslim or you could be a Korean Muslim or what have you. And so I think the issue arises when the two merge. And then when we start butting heads with our older generations, when they're trying to, ascribe their teachings upon you, and you're saying, no, you know what, these are my teachings. And so religion just kind of gets muddled up in there when it's really just a thing in and of itself, right, to decide.
It's interesting that you mentioned that because the situation that we're facing today is very unique and has never been faced before. Our parents grew up in an environment back home. We're all from Pakistan over here. Grew up in an environment back home where our parents, they have an Islamic culture or an Islamic religion. At the same time, the culture is a Pakistani culture. And obviously their parents had the same influence on them. But we living over here now, what do we have? We have the fact that when we're at home, we have a Pakistani culture at home and we have the Islamic religion in our homes.
Right.
But when we go to work, when we go to school, then we have the Western influence, and at the same time we have the Western or the Christian religion, the Western culture as well. So in one sense, it's like a double consciousness. We have two identities that we walk with every single day in our lives.
And in the Western culture that you're talking about, like it's not an ideal place for an Islamic society, the way it's built. For example, anywhere you go, whether it comes from the clothing that you wear, it's very it's very revealing. Whether it goes to any place any setting you go to, there's parties everywhere. There's there's drinking, there's restaurants. There's things that are not
alcohol,
Islamic.
drugs, pork.
Everywhere. It's everywhere.
A lot of elements that go against the.
So it's very hard for you as a youth, or for us as adults, when you go into these settings and not do something that's un-Islamic, or being able to hold our Islamic values. It makes it a lot harder, rather than if you were in Saudi Arabia or if you were in Pakistan. Everything is the same. Everybody, for example, if it was fasting, everybody's fasting. Over here, if it's fasting, nobody's fasting. Only Muslims are fasting, right?
Then at the same time, being raised in this society, like Abid, you were born in Canada, right? Yeah. So being born here, being raised here, we sort of become accepting of these kinds of things because this is the life that we know.
This is your norm.
This is our home. This is the society that we know. These are our friends that we go to school with, right? So it's just like that microcosm, of that school life representing our.
And it's a good point that you mentioned, because I think we are always so bombarded by our society and entertainment and other things other than our religion.
Yeah.
So we don't put enough emphasis on our religion as much as we see everything else because it's always in our face. Religion is not always in our face, like, praying 5 times a day or reading the Quran or, going to dars and all of these things that we're supposed to be doing because
they become secondary.
Yeah, they become secondary. So whatever is in front of you is what you're gonna, you're gonna absorb more, and that's.
And
what
I mean,
you're gonna think about.
if we spend most of our day outside of the house, when we go to work, we go to school, and we're in contact with these things for 14, 16 hours a day.
Yeah.
And then, when we come home and, if our home is that environment that sort of facilitates the religion of Islam and, Islamic education and learning, then we're not getting enough time with one thing. So so that scale isn't balancing.
Exactly, which is why, the one thing I always tell someone whenever they ask about Ahmadiyyat or they ask about Islam, I always say that this is not just a small thing, it's a lifestyle.
Right.
Every aspect of your life changes. When you are an Ahmadi Muslim, the way you think, behave, act, the way you look, present yourself, it's a lifestyle in one.
100%.
So you have to understand that as well. And you have to understand what that entails too. It's not something they just kind of do on the weekends and that's it.
Right. So then it results in the formation of your Muslim identity, right? Which I think has multiple facets. Like you said, taking that courage to go to Subway and say, hey, you know what, can you change your gloves, please? Just because you don't want those same gloves being used. And so the formation of the Muslim identity, I think personally, is dependent upon education, right? Learning about your religion, as we were just discussing, learning about the beauty of Islam, the empowerment that Islam has given you, right? If we look at any of the conventions, any of the laws that have been put into place, right, with regards to equity, you see that, in the 14th century when the Holy Prophet Muhammad, peace be upon him, when he came, he brought all of these teachings with him, right? Yeah. And now we're just starting to ascribe to that. So if anything, you as a Muslim should feel so proud of yourself that you've been doing this, right? Your religion, rather. See, I mixed it up myself here. Your religion has been doing this for 1,400 years, whereas the world is just starting to come to this, right? And on a global timescale, this is nothing, right? On a geological timescale, it's literally a blink of an eye.
I think when we speak about, asking for accommodation or being proud enough to actually speak up that, I am a Muslim, this is what I require, maybe it starts off with small steps, like first getting our group of friends.
Absolutely. It has to be small steps.
Sort of
It's hard. It's hard to go
identifying ourselves as Muslims to our group of friends before we go out into the world and, in front of our friends, if we're shy of asking the person who's working at Subway to, change their gloves.
Right.
But why are we shy to do that? Because our friends don't know that we're Muslim.
Yeah.
And our friends don't know that we need to be accommodated for this. So when we go out with our friends to a place like Subway and, a situation arises, we just stay quiet.
That's a good point because some of my friends, they're vegetarians, right? So, and I know that they're vegetarian, and whenever we go somewhere, it's not even like we have to think twice. I know that we have to go to a place where they accommodate people that they have vegetarian options, right? We're not going to go to a place where they only have meat.
Yeah.
How do I know how to do that? Because they have made that a point to me over and over again, and now I just know, okay, he only eats meat.
That's part of who they are.
Yeah.
And I think on top of that too, going back to the concept of Muslim pride though, I think this is something that I always tell people as well. Whenever someone takes something of our rights, we say we're going to fight for our rights, the rights of our family, the rights of everything else, our friends. But when it comes to the Jamaat, we say, no, let the Jamaat handle it. This is, and we kind of put it separate. But we should make the Jamaat and Islam our pride as well at the same
Absolutely.
time.
Yeah,
so if someone, for example, tomorrow does something to deface Islam or does something that is contrary to the teachings of Jamaat, we should take this as a personal attack on ourselves as well.
Right.
We always fight for our rights, but the Jamaat should be also our rights as well.
Right.
A good example of one that happens, at least for me personally, is like, when we're persecuted. So, when we're persecuted and you hear, that somebody has been, martyred or, a renowned doctor has been killed and he used to help out innocent people.
Right.
When that happens, I feel something inside, like, I get angry. And I'm like, why are they doing that?
Exactly.
Absolutely.
And that has developed over time. But you can't, the youth need to realize you can't just leave it at that. That feeling happens for a few minutes and then it goes away. But if you were really attached and if you really knew what it was about, that feeling would stay longer, and you would have that feeling when it comes to somebody says something bad about the Holy Prophet or somebody says something bad about Islam in general, or if they make a generalization that Islam is this or Muslims are this or Muslims are that, they'd be like, no, that's not.
Exactly.
You would write about it. You would write articles. You would write in the newspaper. You would educate people, right?
This point about persecution that you made is pretty interesting because, living in the West where we're told to be our own person, we can ascribe to any religion that we want. We can be proud of whatever we want. Like, there are actually Ahmadis in the world who are suffering because they have this Muslim identity,
Yeah.
right?
Right.
And they hold
yet,
on to it.
And yet we're over here sort of struggling with our Muslim identity.
Right, you just try to bring it
it's
into
true.
And saying, I'm afraid to ask somebody to change their gloves.
Yeah,
or
like-
other people are being persecuted in other parts of the
Yeah,
world.
like here's like people in Indonesia and Pakistan, they're in jail, they get beaten for being their faith and they're telling them, change your faith. And it's like the time of the Prophet, like when Hazrat Bilal was, by his master, he was on like a hot like sand and there's
hot
a
sand.
hot rock on
Exactly.
top of him. And
Yeah,
they were telling him, to say that, there's more than one God. And he said, no.
Ahad.
Ahad. He
Yeah,
kept saying
yeah.
that, right? So exactly, like, going back to the examples, right? So like, how would we tell the youth how beautiful Islam is, right? Like, what does Islam stand for? So the main thing that the youth needs to realize is, first of all, they need to educate themselves.
Yeah.
If they're too young, the parents need to realize that they need to educate their parents.
But what
their children.
precisely would it be about Islam that, you would be proud of, right? Or I would be proud of?
I think in terms of pride, I think what it is that for me personally, the advice I would give to someone as well is that a lot of people, they take role models, different role models that they make for them as their idols. They'll follow what they do, what they wear, how they behave.
Yeah.
But if you look within Islam, there's many role models as well. To give you an example, two that come to mind right now is that we all have been to university. We all know that, and the funny thing is that going to university, we take for granted the actual concept or institution of university was started by a Muslim, a female Muslim.
Right.
Every single day we're lined up at Tim Hortons to drink our coffee.
Yeah.
But we don't understand that the person
Coffee is a
behind
Muslim
that
invention.
is a
Yeah.
Muslim
Is a Muslim
invention.
invention
So
as
there's
well.
actually people that we can learn from and educate.
A lot of medication, a lot of medical advancements, a lot of medical
Medicine is-
instruments
definitely.
that have
Yeah.
they have been and what's funny is, how did that happen? How did that there was that time? You can correct me if I'm wrong. It was in a
Islamic
certain-
Spain?
There was a huge boom in all sorts of avenues of any sort of technology or anything,
Right.
and that was because
Research
of the
in
teachings.
medicine,
Yeah.
astronomy,
And
various
And I
forms of
strongly believe that was because of the wisdom that those guys got from reading the Holy Quran
Yeah.
and
Absolutely.
searching the Holy Quran. Their minds are open. Their everything was open to them by God, because they, if as Allah says in the Quran, if you ponder and if you are pure-hearted, then he gives you the wisdom of opening doors of like all the treasures of the Quran. So that was opened upon them, and that's how they were able to break through all of these different inventions and
And
advancements in
I just want to
science.
interject here and say that this greatly speaks to the veracity of Islam as well, right? If we look at, this exact boom in science and knowledge, this all came down from the Greeks, right? But the Greeks only got to a point where they said, you know what, we can't go any further with this,
stopped.
right? Exactly, and they bring it down to the Muslims,
Yeah.
who then took it, exponentially to another level, right? Where even now, a lot of the stars in astronomy are still named after the same
I realized that.
Arabic names that were given at that time, right?
Yeah.
Math, science, medicine, everything was invented, created by Muslims through the education that they received, or the wisdom they received.
And I
through
think
the
that's a
Holy
huge
Quran.
point that the youth can be proud of. Like, I'd be proud of that. Like, if you told me, Muslims invented the light bulb, I'd be like, anything that obviously they didn't, but anything that we talk about
Exactly.
that they are proud of, I would be proud of that.
I think even from like a human emotion aspect and perspective, if we think about it, the religion of Islam is in line with human nature, right? And I mean, if we look at what human emotion entails, we find that the religion of Islam has some of the most beautiful teachings, like, for example, morals, even something like forgiveness and punishment. The religion of Islam says that it has to be given at a certain place and time, and only then does it become something moral, or does it become a good
You're 100%
deed,
right. I think it's like the Islam teaches you how to be human, like the actual definition
Yeah,
of a human.
exactly.
It does it in the best, beautiful essence that you can actually do it. And you're 100% right. Morals by themselves are not, they're just actions, they're just, thoughts or feelings and stuff. But in order to be able to make it a good deed, it has to be performed at the right time and
proper
the right
place
place.
and proper time,
right? So, like, you can give us an example of that.
Like,
Mubtab,
for
if you can.
example, this example of forgiveness and punishment, the Holy Quran says that, you should forgive, but then if there's a time that, you need to punish, then punishment would be that thing that you need to exact at that time. But even taking it further than that, if we take a look at the time of the Holy Prophet, peace be upon him, Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu was in a war once. And, this is a wartime situation where there's bloodshed left, right, and center.
Right.
And he was about to kill the enemy when the enemy spat in his face. And, you would naturally think that, this would infuriate the person who is, about to slay him. But Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu turned around and walked away. And the person who was on the ground, he was like,
Wondering what happened.
exactly, wondering what happened. Like, I'm supposed to be dead right now, so what happened? So he asked Hazrat Ali, and Hazrat Ali radiallahu ta'ala anhu said that, I was going to kill you in the way of God, in jihad fi sabilillah. But then when you spat in my face, I took it personally and I wanted to kill you for myself.
So he was feeling anger at that time.
Exactly. And he didn't suppress it, but he harnessed his emotions. And that's what the religion of Islam is about. Considering how many emotions humans have, we get sad, we get happy, we get joyful, you know, we're just ecstatic sometimes.
Right.
There's so many emotions throughout a 24-hour period, right? But knowing when and where to apply that emotion, knowing who to say what to at what time, this is what the religion of Islam alludes to and teaches as well, right? And I think that's what, you know, Ghulam Sahib was saying that, you know, Islam teaches you how to be human in its actuals.
That's a wonderful example. If you look at that, if you try to put yourself in that setting, you're in a war zone. Now you have to, how do you control yourself? But he controlled himself and he said, I can't do this now because it's personal and it won't be the right action. I have to walk away from this because I can only kill you in the way of God, only for God. And he knew to make that decision. That's massive, that's huge, right? And that's what the teaching of Islam teaches in anything. And when it comes to love, if it comes to punish somebody, when it comes to, you know, all the attributes of God.
Patience as well.
Patience as well, yeah. And if you're able to do this as a Muslim, you know, you work on this your whole life, you know, we're taught to do this throughout our lives, you become an amazing asset to society, right? Yeah. And why are you supposed to do this? The main things that these come from are, you know, your hukukullah and hukukul ibad, your rights of man and your rights of God, right? So your rights of God are obviously, you know, you're supposed to pray 5 times a day, you know, give your rights to Allah Ta'ala, and then your rights of man are the ones you're supposed to be good to humans, you know?
And I think what's interesting about all this is the fact that, you know, going back to what we were talking about, where this whole came from, which is all these different aspects. You have, you know, identity, inferiority complex, Islam, Muslim. We need to really sit down, as we're all saying, I think, in agreement, and educate ourselves first of what these all mean. And it is very complex to begin with as well, but educate ourselves too, because Islam gives us the perfect guidance. Right. But at the same time, obviously, we live in a very complex world. As human beings, we're very complex as well. And we have multiple things that are coming up, right? And even we were talking about culture before, sometimes what ends up happening is we feel that, oh, our culture is the best and another culture is not, you know, not good at all. But at the same time, we have to understand we should take the best out of each culture. I'll give you an example though. In the West,
that's exactly what Hazur Anwar may Allah be his helper says as well, that, you know, adopt the good things that you see in people, even if you're living in the West, and those things that are negative, you know, you shun them or you just aside. But you do adopt those positive things.
And that's the example I was going to give, was that, for example, in the West, we find that in terms of time and punctuality, they're very punctual, right? But at the same time, for example, it's a very good habit to have. At the same time, for example, from a Pakistani perspective, we focus very big on family life. That's a very good thing to have as well. So take the best from both sides.
Take the best things from all of these cultures.
And what does that do? Taking the best of all the cultures makes you a better Muslim.
A better individual.
And a better human being.
Absolutely.
Right?
I think having a living example in front of us is something that will actually, you know, show us how we can go about being proud of the Muslim identity. I mean, look at Hazur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, alone. After every speech that he gave over here during his Canada tour, and I mean, wherever Hazur gives speeches and lectures, you know, when they give the reactions of people, you know, the people who were sitting in the crowd, and they say, you know, this is such a beautiful religion. We didn't know that Islam taught this, right? So, I mean, just from that, you could tell that, you know, people who think that Islam is a religion that, you know, they vilify Muslims, and, you know, Muslims are seen in a negative light because of the media nowadays, right? Because of this, you know, we all feel that, you know, we should sort of hide our Muslim identity. But then when we see Hazur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, giving those powerful lectures and then people's reactions to it, when sometimes people are in tears when they meet Hazur, right? This sort of, you know, that's a role model,
you know,
me at least.
And speaking about role models, you know, and Hazur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, I was watching one of his classes on MTA, and I saw a segment which, you know, truly had a huge impact on me. So in the media, we're always hearing that Muslims are suppressing women, right? They're not equal to, you know, we don't give them equal rights, and that women are seen as inferior to men. And so in Hazur's class to, I think it was a Lajna, and, you know, he said that when he and his wife, sorry, it was to the Khudam, the University Khudam, he said that when he and his wife are walking, right, he says, as a Muslim man, you should either walk beside your wife or behind her, right? And this is a man of God, right? It's no ordinary human being. And he says that he himself either walks beside his wife or behind her. Look at the amount of respect that he gives to his wife. And if that role model, right, is showing us exactly how to behave with women, the level of respect that we have to give to women, how could someone raise a finger and say, you know what,
you know, one thing
we don't respect women?
That I've also noticed about Hazur Anwar, I mean, take a look at, you know, when we're in the corporate world, you know, our bosses, our supervisors, they're not usually people that we can, approach and, talk to them about our feelings and stuff. But look how much time beloved Huzur, may Allah be his helper, actually gives to youth, especially during that
true.
Canada tour.
Right.
There were so many Amin ceremonies, so many classes with children, right? And I mean, Huzur Anwar, may Allah be his helper, considering how busy of a person Huzur is, he's probably the most accessible leader that I can think of.
Yeah, that's true.
Right?
That's very true.
And I mean, we're talking about, we have bosses that, we see every single day.
Absolutely.
Right? And we can't approach
They won't
them
give you the time of day. Yeah.
Exactly.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, yeah.
Guys,
Right,
I wanted to bring this back to the main thing that the youth can focus on if they wanted to if they wanted to take away something. So, one is the Quran. They need to study the Quran and they need to look at the history of Islam and all the commandments Allah Ta'ala gives so that you can know more about the religion. And number two is look at the practice of the Holy Prophet Sallallahu, right? So you need to read read his biography, look at the wars he fought, look at what he did, where he did it, right? And that will help you learn and how to become Muslim and what a Muslim is, and that'll help you become stronger and be more proud of being a Muslim.
And I think just going off that, I think the one quote that I want to share that kind of like encompasses all of this as well is that one time someone stated that, we are drowning in information, but starving for knowledge.
Yeah.
That's right.
And,
That's very
in essence, what we have to do is we have to educate ourselves. Information is all over there about identity, class, culture, religion, and everything, but we need to really go in depth and to find out what actually these things are and educate ourselves.
So I think that's time for today. I really enjoyed this discussion. Maybe we can meet again to discuss some other topics. I would love to.
Inshallah. Yeah.
Inshallah.
ठीक है, okay, Jazakallah.
Jazakallah.
नौनिहालाने जमात मुझे कुछ कहना है